Title: The Climber Who Caught Me When I Slipped Off the Cliff. My boots slipped on wet granite 3,000 feet up. A stranger's hand shot out and caught my wrist. "I've got you," she said. "Don't look down." That grip changed my entire life within seconds. 6 months later, we were engaged in secret. Then her father, a senator, found out everything. He gave her an ultimatum: family or me. I never expected the answer she chose. My name is Sam Rivera, and for 29 years I built walls so high no one could see what I was hiding behind them. This is the story of the woman who taught me that falling isn't something to fear, especially when someone is there to catch you. I worked as a park photographer in Boulder, Colorado, chasing sunrise light across granite peaks most people only ever saw on postcards. That October morning I hiked alone into El Dorado Canyon, chasing a shot of fog rolling through the valley before the sun burned it away. I stepped onto a ledge I had photographed a dozen times before, never expecting the rock beneath my boot to crumble without warning. My camera flew from my hands as I slid, fingers clawing at stone. My heart lodged somewhere in my throat. A hand closed around my wrist like iron, hauling me back onto solid rock before I even understood what was happening. "I've got you," the stranger said, voice steady despite whatever adrenaline was surely pounding through her own veins. "Don't look down." Her name was Blake Whitman, a professional climber who trained routes nobody else attempted before noon on a Tuesday. We sat on that ledge for 20 minutes, my hands shaking. Her arm braced around my shoulders like she wasn't ready to let go yet. She walked me down the whole trail, refusing to leave until she watched me climb safely into my truck. Before I drove off, she scrawled her number on a gas station receipt and said, "Call me once your hands stop shaking." I called that same night, telling myself it was only to say thank you properly for saving my life. Blake answered on the second ring, like she had been half expecting me to actually follow through on my promise. We talked for 2 hours about nothing important, and somehow that nothing felt more honest than most conversations I'd had in years. She mentioned, almost carelessly, that her mother had died the previous spring, and something in her voice went quiet and careful. I didn't push, but I filed that sentence away, sensing it mattered more than she was letting on that night. A week later she invited me to watch her train at the local climbing gym, promising it was much less terrifying than a real cliff. Watching her move up that wall was like watching someone speak a language made entirely of muscle and trust. Afterward, over coffee, she asked about my photography, and I found myself talking longer than I had in months to anyone new. "You see things," she said, studying one of my printed canyon shots. "Most people just look. You actually see." I felt my face heat up and busied myself with my cup, unused to being noticed so precisely by anyone. We started meeting weekly, always with some excuse: a new trail, a gallery opening, a documentary neither of us particularly wanted to watch alone. My best friend Priya teased me mercilessly, asking when I planned to admit this was clearly more than friendship. "It's not like that," I told her, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed my own denial anymore. One evening, hiking back from Blake's training session, the fog rolled in thick and we got turned around on the trail. We ended up sitting under a rock overhang for an hour, waiting for visibility to clear, shoulders pressed together for warmth. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Blake asked, staring out at the gray nothing in front of us. "I've known I liked women since I was 15, and I've spent half my life being terrified someone would find out." I told her I understood that fear better than she probably realized, and for the first time I said the words out loud myself. "I'm gay too," I said, my voice barely above the wind. "I've just never had anyone worth being brave for." She turned to look at me then, and something in her expression made the whole mountain feel suddenly very small. "Maybe we found someone now," she said quietly, and I didn't trust myself to answer with anything but silence. The fog cleared eventually, but neither of us moved for a long time, unwilling to break whatever had just settled between us. That night I couldn't sleep, replaying her words over and over until they stopped sounding like a possibility and started sounding like a fact. 2 weeks passed before either of us said anything more direct, both too afraid of ruining something neither wanted to lose. It was Blake who finally broke first, showing up at my apartment with 2 coffees and no clear excuse for being there. "I keep thinking about you," she admitted at my door, cup trembling slightly in her hand. "I don't know what to do about it." "You could come inside," I said, surprising myself with how steady my own voice sounded. That evening we talked until midnight, and when she finally stood to leave, I kissed her before either of us could overthink it. She kissed me back like she'd been waiting for permission her whole life, and something in my chest finally unclenched. We didn't define anything that night, but we both understood something had shifted permanently between us. Over the following month, we became inseparable, meeting for sunrise hikes and late dinners neither of us wanted to end. Blake taught me the basics of climbing, and I taught her how to slow down long enough to actually look through a camera lens. My mother called weekly, always asking if I'd met anyone, and I always deflected, unready to name what was happening. Priya noticed the change in me immediately. The lighter way I laughed, the way I checked my phone constantly for Blake's texts. "You're happy," she said one afternoon. "I haven't seen you like this in years. Whoever she is, don't let her go." I still hadn't told Priya it was Blake specifically, holding the secret close like something fragile that might shatter if spoken aloud. One night, wrapped in blankets on Blake's balcony, she finally told me about her father, Senator Richard Whitman. "He spent his entire career voting against people like us," she said flatly. "He doesn't know about me. Nobody in my family does." I felt something cold settle in my stomach, understanding for the first time the size of what we were building in secret. "What happens if he finds out?" asked, and Blake's silence answered more clearly than any words could have. "I don't know," she finally said, "but I know I'm not ready to lose you over finding out." We agreed, without much discussion, to keep things quiet for now, telling ourselves it was only temporary caution. 3 months into whatever we were, Blake asked me to move in with her, half joking, half hopeful. Watching my face for a reaction, I said yes before I'd even fully processed the question, and we spent that whole weekend hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs. Living together revealed a rhythm neither of us expected. Mornings spent trading sections of the newspaper. Evenings spent debating dinner plans. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my home was actually mine, shared honestly with someone who saw all of me. The first rail crack appeared when Blake's climbing sponsor scheduled a magazine profile, wanting photos of her personal life for authenticity. "I told them I live alone," she said, avoiding my eyes as she packed away the framed photo of us from her nightstand. I understood the necessity, but something in me still ached watching her hide our life like evidence of a crime. A week later, Blake's old climbing partner Casey Reyes reappeared, freshly back from an expedition and clearly still holding feelings for Blake. Casey was warm to my face but cold in the small ways only someone competing for attention knows how to be. "We used to be really close," Casey told me pointedly at a group dinner. "I guess things change when someone new comes along." Blake brushed it off as nothing, but I noticed how carefully she avoided being alone with Casey after that comment. My own workplace brought its own pressure when my supervisor mentioned a promotion opening up, one requiring a family-friendly public image for grant applications. I laughed it off at the time, not yet understanding how literally that phrase would eventually apply to me. One evening, Blake's father called unexpectedly, announcing he was flying into Denver for a fundraiser and wanted to see her. Blake went pale and immediately began rearranging our apartment, tucking away anything that might reveal I lived there too. "I'm not ashamed of you," she said quickly, seeing my face. "I just need more time before he knows." I told her I understood, though the words tasted bitter, like agreeing to disappear from my own life for an evening. Senator Whitman arrived charming and polished, shaking my hand and calling me a lovely friend without a hint of suspicion. I smiled through dinner, answering careful questions about my job, watching Blake perform a version of herself I barely recognized. After he left, Blake broke down on our kitchen floor, apologizing over and over for something I hadn't even asked her to apologize for. "I hate lying to him," she said. "But I hate the idea of losing everything even more." I held her for a long time that night, unsure which fear of hers frightened me more, losing him or losing herself. Casey's presence grew harder to ignore over the following weeks, showing up at Blake's training sessions uninvited, texting late at night about old times. I tried not to let jealousy control me, but the quiet doubt crept in anyway, especially on nights Blake came home distracted and distant. One afternoon I found a message on Blake's phone from Casey, something about remembering what we had before this, and my stomach dropped. I didn't confront her immediately, choosing instead to watch, hating myself a little for not trusting the woman I loved. At work, my supervisor casually asked if I had a partner, mentioning the promotion committee valued wholesome personal stability in candidates. I said I was single, the lie slipping out easily, and immediately hated how natural hiding had become for me too. Priya finally guessed the truth one night, catching Blake's jacket hanging in my closet during a surprise visit. "It's her, isn't it?" she asked gently, and I finally nodded, relief and terror washing over me at once. Priya hugged me tightly, promising my secret was safe, though her worried expression told me she understood exactly what was at stake. A charity climbing event brought Casey and Blake together again, this time with cameras and sponsors watching their every interaction closely. I stood at the edge of the crowd, technically just a friend, watching Casey's hand linger too long on Blake's shoulder for photographs. That night, I finally asked Blake directly if something had happened between her and Casey, my voice shaking with effort. "Nothing happened," Blake said firmly, "but I understand why it looks that way, and I'm sorry I let it get this far." She promised to set clear boundaries with Casey, and for a while, things between us felt steady again, almost peaceful. Then the promotion committee at my job called me in, informing me candidly that a rumor had reached them about my personal situation. Someone, they wouldn't say who, had mentioned seeing me with Blake at the charity event, holding hands when I thought no one was watching. I denied nothing and confirmed nothing, walking out of that meeting with my job intact but my sense of safety completely shattered. That evening I told Blake what happened, watching guilt and fear cross her face in equal measure. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said. "Everything we've built could fall apart because of one rumor." For the first time, I felt real anger rise in me, not at her, but at a world that made hiding necessary to survive. "I'm tired of being someone's secret," I told her. "Even yours. Especially yours." The words landed harder than I intended, and Blake flinched like I had physically struck her across the room. We didn't speak for 2 full days after that fight, both of us retreating into silence rather than risk saying something unforgivable. On the 3rd day, Blake found me on our balcony and sat down beside me without a word, just present, just there. "You're right," she finally said. "I've been so scared of losing my father that I've been willing to lose you slowly instead. I don't want that anymore," she continued. "I just don't know how to tell him without losing everything I've ever known." I told her I couldn't make that decision for her, but I needed her to know I wouldn't wait forever in the shadows. 2 weeks later, Casey resurfaced with a vengeance, telling a sponsor reporter that Blake was secretly involved with a woman, hoping to force her hand. The story broke online before Blake even knew it was coming, her name trending alongside speculation, photos, and cruel comment threads. Senator Whitman called within the hour, his voice cold and clipped, demanding Blake fly to Washington immediately to handle this mess. Blake packed a bag with shaking hands, telling me she needed to face her father alone before anything else happened. "I'll fix this," she said at the door, though neither of us fully believed the promise as it left her mouth. While she was gone, my own workplace erupted with whispers, My photo circulating alongside hers in gossip forums I never wanted to see. My supervisor called me in again. This time informing me the promotion had been quietly given to someone else entirely. "It's not about your work," she said carefully. "It's about optics." "I'm sorry, Sam. Truly." I left that meeting feeling smaller than I had in years, punished for a truth I hadn't even fully spoken aloud yet. Priya showed up that night with takeout and wine, refusing to let me sit alone with the weight of everything collapsing at once. "This isn't fair," she said. "None of this is fair. But you are not the problem here, Sam." I appreciated her fierceness, even as doubt gnawed at me, wondering if Blake would choose her father over the wreckage we'd made together. 3 days passed without a single word from Blake, and I began preparing myself for the possibility she wouldn't come back at all. On the 4th night, my phone buzzed with a message. "Meeting him tomorrow. Wish me luck. I love you, Sam." Those 3 words, sent so plainly, undid something tight in my chest that had been clenched for days. I called my own mother that night, finally ready to say the truth I'd been circling around my entire adult life. "Mom, I'm gay," I said, bracing for impact, my whole body rigid with years of accumulated fear. There was a long pause, and then, quietly, she said, "I know, sweetheart. I've known for a long time." I sat frozen, done, as she explained she'd suspected since I was 17 and had simply been waiting for me to be ready. "I made you something years ago," she admitted. "A quilt. For whenever you got married. It's been in my closet since you were 22. I cried harder at that confession than I had at any point during the entire chaotic week surrounding Blake. The next morning, Blake called from Washington, her voice hollow. He said if I don't end things with you, he'll cut me off completely. Sponsorships. Family. Everything, she continued. He said no daughter of his would embarrass the family name this way. I asked her, as gently as I could manage, what she wanted. Not what she thought she was supposed to want. "I want you," she said immediately. "I just don't know how to want you without losing everything else I've ever had." I told her I couldn't ask her to choose, but I also couldn't keep living as someone's carefully hidden secret indefinitely. She flew home 2 days later, quieter than I'd ever seen her, carrying a version of exhaustion that looked almost like grief. That night she told me she'd requested time before giving her father a final answer, needing space to think clearly. I gave her that space, though every day of silence between us felt like standing on that same crumbling ledge again. Meanwhile, my gallery show, months in planning, was suddenly threatened when the sponsoring foundation quietly pulled its funding without explanation. A friend on the board later admitted, off the record, that Senator Whitman's office had made a call recommending they reconsider their association with me. I felt the walls closing in from every direction, my career and my relationship both hanging by threads pulled by the same powerful hand. Priya helped me scramble for alternative funding, calling in favors from every contact she had in the local arts community. "We're not letting him win this," she said fiercely. "You've worked too hard for one bitter man to erase it." A small independent gallery downtown agreed to host the show instead. Smaller than planned but entirely, defiantly mine. Blake showed up at my apartment the week before opening night, eyes red, clearly having made some kind of decision at last. "I told him," she said simply. "I told him everything. And I told him I choose you. Whatever that costs me." I stood frozen, unsure whether to feel relief or fear for what consequences that confession might bring down on both of us. "What did he say?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He hung up on me," Blake said. "But Sam," for the first time in years, I actually feel like myself. We held each other for a long time that night, grieving and celebrating in the same breath, unsure which feeling belonged where. The gallery opening arrived faster than either of us was ready for. My photographs finally hung on walls that felt entirely my own. Priya arrived early, hugging me tightly, whispering that my mother's quilt was folded in the trunk of her car, just in case. Blake stood beside me for the first time in public, hand in mine, refusing to let go despite curious, whispering onlookers. Casey arrived unexpectedly too, standing awkwardly near the entrance, looking more regretful than triumphant now that the damage was done. "I'm sorry," Casey said quietly, approaching us near the drink table. "I let jealousy make me cruel. That was never fair to either of you." Blake accepted the apology carefully, not quite forgiving yet, but no longer carrying the anger like a weapon either. Midway through the evening, a hush fell over the room as an unexpected figure stepped through the gallery doors. Senator Whitman stood in the entrance, out of place in his tailored suit among the artists and photographers filling the space. Blake's hand tightened around mine. Her whole body braced for confrontation, for humiliation, for the worst possible outcome imaginable. Instead, he walked slowly toward one particular photograph, a shot of El Dorado Canyon at dawn, the very cliff where we'd first met. "Your mother loved photographs like this," he said quietly, not looking at either of us directly. "She always wanted to visit Colorado." Blake's breath caught audibly, and I realized neither of us had expected him to mention her mother at all tonight. "Before she died," he continued, voice unsteady, "she made me promise I would never let pride cost me my only daughter. I've spent months trying to find a way around that promise," he admitted. "I couldn't find one that let me live with myself." Blake stood silent, tears sliding down her face, unable to speak through the shock of hearing those words spoken aloud. "I don't understand everything about this," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "But I understand I almost lost you over something I don't have to." He turned to me then, extending his hand formally, almost stiffly, like a man relearning an old, unfamiliar gesture. "I owe you an apology too," he said, "for every call I made trying to make your life harder. That was wrong of me." I shook his hand, unsure what to say, settling on simple honesty instead of anything more elaborate. "I just want your daughter to be happy," I said. "That's all I've ever wanted, Senator." Something in his expression softened further at that, the last of his rigid posture finally loosening from his shoulders. "Call me Richard," he said quietly. "I think we have a lot of catching up to do. All three of us." The gallery erupted into quiet conversation again as the tense moment passed, guests slowly returning to admiring photographs on the walls. Blake pulled me aside near the back, pressing her forehead against mine, breathing like she'd just surfaced from underwater. "I can't believe that just happened," she whispered. "I thought I was walking in here to lose everything tonight." "You didn't lose anything," I told her. "You just finally got to keep all of it. Honestly." Out in the open. Later that night, after the crowd thinned, Richard lingered by the door, watching his daughter laugh freely for what looked like the first time in years. "She used to laugh like that as a little girl," he told me quietly. I forgot how much I missed the sound of it. I realized then that his walk through those doors hadn't been about politics or public image at all, only grief and love finding a way home. Casey approached once more before leaving, telling Blake she was proud of her courage, sincerity replacing the jealousy that had once driven her. "Take care of each other," she said, and for the first time all night, it sounded like she genuinely meant it. Priya found me near closing, eyes bright, squeezing my shoulder. "Your mother's quilt is officially getting used sooner than she expected." I laughed through unexpected tears, overwhelmed by how quickly a night that started in fear had turned into something like a beginning. Blake found me by the last photograph, the canyon shot her father had lingered over earlier that evening. "This is where it started," she said softly, tracing the frame's edge. "Some rock crumbling under your boot at exactly the right moment. I used to think that fall was the scariest moment of my life," I told her. Now I think it was the luckiest. She kissed me there. In front of everyone left in the room, no longer flinching at the idea of being seen. 6 weeks later, Richard hosted a small dinner at his home. Awkward but earnest, introducing me properly to family for the very first time. My mother finally met Blake over video call that same week, immediately declaring her entirely too polite to be dating her daughter. Blake's climbing sponsors, worried initially, discovered public support for her honesty far outweighed any backlash they had feared losing. My gallery show extended 2 additional weeks after word spread about the exhibit, curiosity and support arriving in equal measure. Casey and Blake slowly rebuilt a careful, honest friendship, one built without the old competition or hidden resentment between them. Priya became something like family herself, present at every dinner, every celebration, every quiet Sunday we spent rebuilding our lives. My supervisor, embarrassed by the earlier promotion decision, quietly offered me a new position months later. When I accepted on my own terms, Richard began attending events with Blake publicly, awkward but trying, learning slowly how to be the father she'd always needed. 1 year after that first slip on the cliff, Blake proposed on the very same ledge where she had first caught my wrist. "I've been trying to catch you ever since," she said, kneeling carefully on granite that had once nearly taken everything from us. I said yes before she even finished the question, laughing and crying at once, the mountain wind carrying my answer far below us. My mother's quilt finally left her closet for good, wrapped around both our shoulders the night we celebrated our engagement together. Standing on that same ledge months later, I understood that falling had never been the danger, staying hidden had been the real fall all along. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to reach out anyway, hoping someone is there to catch you. Fendi.